Good morning, everybody. Today we'll be discussing the educational structures of these two countries, mainly Cuba and South Africa. And I'll be starting with the structure of Cuba. Cuba's education system is state-controlled, free and compulsory for everybody. The policy of Cuba is education is a fundamental right guaranteed by the state with principles including mass access, gratuity, and democratic. The administration of Cuba. Cuba consists of Minister of Education, which controls preschools and technical professionals and upper schools. And there's also Minister of Higher Education, which oversees universities and tertiary programs. The teaching structures of Cuba is preschools, which is 0 from 6, upper secondary school and pre-university, which is grade 10 to 12, and teaching training starts upper for those who are doing universities degrees and so on. The support services of Cuba is free meals, medical nursing services in schools, councils, and teacher support.
I'll be talking about the South African system structures, the key policies, administrations, and the teaching structures. For the policy framework, there are two main columns for South Africa. There is the South African School Act of 1994, that is compulsory for grade R to 12. There is also the National Education Policy Act of 1996, standards and caps that is focusing on literacy and numeracy. The teaching structures and support. South Africa has SAYS, registration and ethics, that is for Employment Educators Act of 1998. It supports the whole school, evaluation, HR training, district advisors, middle-tier collaboration. For administration, the national sets policy, curriculum, funding norms, and monitoring. For provisional or district, it implements programs, allocates funds or budgets for schools, and provides school and support. For school, there's SGB handles governance for fees, languages, and policy.
So under Cuba, I'll be talking about internal influence and external influence. So Cuba education is free for all learners, aiming for equal education chances for learners. It struggles with local issues and outside pressures. So system structure, the Minister of Education in Cuba controls all the schools from preschool to university. So learners attend primary school ages 6 to 11, and then secondary 12 to 15 years, and then later choose pre-university or job training. Teachers use activity learning like group projects with community help, like activities using hands-on objects. And then for internal influence, since 1956, the government teaches Marxist values for loyal citizens. And then the 1961 literacy drive hit nearly 100% reading rates even in farms. So culture pushes teamwork via youth clubs, and then religion plays a little role due to state clashes. And then for external influences, as an Iceland with few resources, Cuba faces 1960s US trade that blocks money and supplies, causing teachers shortages. And then we have productivity. Almost all learners attend school with top literacy and strong math and science scores. So free education gets top budget for fairness, but low cash means books and buildings. So job training boosts skills and poverty.
Yes, so I'll be talking about the South African education system in terms of the external and the internal influences that shape the South African education. I'll be starting with the internal, our class sizes. Mostly in the South African schools, we find that most of the schools in South Africa experience a larger number of students who will be residing or being taught in one class. It can happen. Why? Because learners learn differently. And learners learn differently, they need a special attention, pedagogy, teaching learners in a way that they understand better. Number 2 is language of instruction. Normally in South Africa, we experience learners who normally do speak at home their home language, their mother tongue. And when they come to school, intermediate phase, they are being changed from their mother tongue to the language of instruction, which is English. You can't expect a learner to learn better using English, which is not their mother tongue. So the external, I will just name 2, which are the socio-economic conditions like your poverty. You can't expect a learner, a grade 4 learner to maybe like focus inside of a class with an empty stomach. Why? Because learners from grade 4 to 6 have a smaller focus span. You expect them to focus, but how? With hunger or with an empty stomach. The second one is social and community factors like your violence. You can't teach a learner with fear inside. Learner cannot learn with fear or anxiety. Thank you.
Cuba's education and productivity. Cuba's education system prioritizes universal access to higher investment despite economic content, though productivity gains remain limited. Key indicators reveal strong enrollment but challenges in translating education into economic input. Access indicators. Cuba guarantees free education from preschool through university with near universal enrollment. Out of school at low primary but higher at secondary school, showing some drop off at higher levels. Quality indicators. All teachers meet minimum qualifications and schools have full access to basics like electricity, water, and computers. Outcomes. High education attainment coexists with low labor productivity as Cuba ranks low per capita income despite literacy near 100%. Education contributes to GDP growth via improved labor quality, but total factor productivity declines, limiting overall economic impact. Cuba allocates heavily to education 71 billion pesos in 2025 for 1.4 million students, part of 71 of the budget for education. Priorities include teacher training, facilities, and universal coverage over material expansion like internet.
Productivity in South Africa. The South African government has made significant strides in access. We've moved from 97 to 98% of intake in schools. Most schools which are struggling are schools in the poorest quintiles, like in rural areas. Quality indicators in education outcomes. There's diversity in our country. We're using different language, so the language barrier hinders productivity. In funding priorities, the South African government uses an act of 1996 that allocates funds to school through the SGB, which provides the money on how it's going to be used. In outcomes, the outcomes is mostly seen when it gets to matric, where students have to get a bachelor pass so they can move on to higher education institutions, universities and colleges.
I will explore Cuba's strengths like world-class education, healthcare, followed by its major weaknesses. Cuba has strong sectors like mining, nickel, sugar, tobacco that provides economic growth. Cuba has world-class free healthcare and education system that yields a high literacy, nearly 100%, and life expectancy, revealing richer nations. Cuba's weaknesses are immigration, debt, and a dual currency system that distorts markets and limits investments.
energy shortages and import dependency style growth and cause a frequent blackouts.
I'd like to discuss the state of our education system based on the weaknesses and strengths in South Africa. On our strengths, we have a system that offers a various school choices like public schools and private schools. They both promote sports and addresses past inequalities. This builds unity and equips learners with job skills and promoting social cohesion. However, we also face significant challenges. There's a stark inequality between rich city schools and poor rural schools. Teacher absenteeism and overcrowded classrooms hinders learning and low scores on international tests.
And the recommendations from Cuba. I believe that developing nations can learn a lot from the Cuban educational system, especially in areas like STEM education, equity factors, and teacher preparation. It's critical to modify these lessons in local context. Firstly, things that can be adapted from the Cuban educational system. Cuba has a strict approach to teaching preparation, particularly in rural areas. It mostly focuses on STEM education and enhances things like science and maths. Secondly, things to avoid under the Cuban educational system. Due to the resource limitation, partnership and resource allocation, it can take a more enhanced teaching approach to the educational systems in South Africa.
From what we've heard, South Africa, these are the things that South Africans should do in order to improve their education system. Firstly, invest in teacher quality and support. Secondly, expand and educate literacy and numeracy. Thirdly, strengthen infrastructure and access, especially in rural areas. Fourthly, integrate technology and future skills into the curriculum. Things that South Africa should also avoid. Avoid underfunding and neglect of rural areas and township schools. Secondly, avoid rigid, exam-driven curricula without enough practical or life skills.
With all that being said, South Africa and Cuba have developed and maintained a long-life relationship where South Africa exchanges students to go and learn from one of the best leading countries in medicine. And that program is still ongoing till this day. We thank you for your attention.
Thank you.